Hello, my name's Tom and this is Proper Honest Tech. Earlier this year, Apple updated their Apple TV 4K box, launching a brand new version of the popular streaming device. I use the term upgraded a little loosely here because the upgrades to the box itself were pretty minimal, save for a specs bump under the hood, things like a new processor, better Bluetooth, and improved Wi-Fi. But where Apple did make sweeping improvements was in the remote control. In fact, Apple didn't just make improvements, they essentially tore up the design of the previous model and started again from scratch, which is good as the remote that came with the 4th gen Apple TV, the original Apple TV 4K, was universally disliked. In fact, even before people got their hands on the new remote, it was clear that it was going to be better than the previous one. So this is clearly good news for people who don't already own an Apple TV 4K. But what if you do? Should you upgrade to the new box? Or should you just go out and buy the new remote control, which you can do? Apple are selling it by itself and it is compatible with the original Apple TV 4K and HD. Or should you just stick with what you already have? In this video, that's what I aim to find out. I'm going to show you the new remote control and compare it with the previous one, show you where it's similar to the old one, where it's different, and give you an idea of whether I think it's worth the cost of an upgrade or not. So first up, let's grab the two remotes and just have a quick look at them side by side. One thing that really surprised me was that in photos and marketing shots, the new remote control looks significantly taller than the old one, but in reality, that's absolutely not the case. The new remote is literally a fraction taller than the old one. It's also a fraction smaller in terms of the width. As you can see here, if I sit the new one on top of the old one, they're both extremely similar. The old remote weighs around 45 grams, while the new one weighs around 64. It's still significantly lighter than most modern-day remote controls, but that's an increase of 42%, so it does feel noticeably heavier than the old one when you're holding it. This is a matter of personal taste, of course. I actually prefer it, as I find that the added weight gives the remote a slightly more premium feel when compared with the old one. And the new remote is quite a bit thicker than the old one, shown here if we hold the remotes and look at them from the bottom. You can see that both remotes connect for charging via Lightning port, with the new one having a panel attached via screws at the bottom. How very non-Apple. You'd expect this to be one chunk of chiseled aluminium really, but there you go. The differences continue on the remote itself in terms of the function buttons. On the old remote, the Siri button was on the left-hand side between the play-pause button and the menu button, whereas this time around, Apple have put it on the right-hand side of the device, in keeping with the power button on a modern iPhone. So from a muscle memory perspective, this makes a lot of sense. I found that in practicality, I much prefer having the button here, as a common issue with the old remote was that I'd accidentally engage Siri by tapping the button when I meant to hit play-pause, so tucking it out the way works really well for me. Then, in terms of other function buttons, you've got the same play-pause button as before, the same TV or home button as before, the same volume button as before. Apple have added a button in terms of the mute button, which I guess is as useful as any mute button on a remote control really, and they've swapped the menu button out for a back button, which I think is more in keeping with the way that most people use the old menu button on the previous model anyway. Just like on the old screen, you can program the TV button to either take you to the Apple TV app or to the home screen. One other button that you may have noticed is the power button in the upper right corner of the remote, which I'm really pleased that they chose to add. I know it's not very Apple to switch devices off, and I'm also aware that most Apple devices never really go off anyway unless you kill the power. Most of the time you're just putting a device to sleep. But it did used to bug me that I'd essentially leave the old Apple TV box to put itself to sleep and then have to manually power my TV off separately. No more with the power button. When you're done watching, simply hold the power button for a moment and both the Apple TV and any connected TV or AV device will also switch off. The part of the remote that caused people the most issues last time around is thankfully the part of the remote that has had the most attention this time around, the touchpad. On the previous remote, everything above the menu and home button was essentially touchpad, and it was modelled around touchpads from Mac computers, although nowhere near as good. Swipe up or down, left or right with your thumb, and click the touchpad to select, all very straightforward. The issue was that it was either under-responsive if you turned the sensitivity down, or so over-responsive that you'd find yourself struggling to do anything with any kind of accuracy. I would constantly find myself overrunning on the home screen when whizzing through different apps, and being able to navigate to a specific point while watching a TV show was borderline impossible. You could also move forwards or backwards 10 seconds in whatever you were watching by clicking the left or right upper side of the trackpad. But again, this was so hit and miss. I'd find that I'd be able to do it once or twice, and then exactly the same action wouldn't work a moment or two later. It all added up to making the old Siri Remote extremely frustrating to use. Thankfully, the touchpad is significantly improved this time around, with Apple drawing inspiration from their older iPods rather than the new Macs. On the outside is a touch-sensitive ring, which can either be clicked like a traditional clickpad to go up or down, left or right, or gently swiped upwards or under from left to right, right or left to scrub through whatever you're watching with a surprising amount of accuracy. The middle is both a click button and a touchpad, and you can choose this functionality in the settings, so you can pick the method of working that suits you and your needs. In terms of Siri functionality, nothing has changed. It all works as you'd expect. I noticed that the old remote seems to have a microphone both on the front and the back, whereas this one only has one on the front, but it doesn't seem to affect the Siri functionality in any way. If you're interested in learning some of the different ways you can use Siri to interact with your Apple TV, check out the videos that I've made sharing some tips and tricks for getting the most out of your Apple TV. I'll link them in the descriptions box. So, that's the comparison done. What do I think about it, and do I think you should buy one? My honest answer is that it's going to depend on your personal situation and use case. If you've not bought an Apple TV 4K before and are now in the market for one, then you're in the easiest category to recommend this to. Apple no longer offer the previous version, so any new Apple TV 4K that you purchase is going to come with this new remote, not the old one. If, on the other hand, you're thinking of paying money to upgrade to this, I think you need to explore your options. The new remote is very good, there's absolutely no denying that, and if you're an Apple TV power user who's grown frustrated with the existing remote but is otherwise happy with the performance from your 4th gen box, it could be worth the cost of upgrading. However, that cost isn't cheap. The remote on its own costs £55 here in the UK or $60 in the US, which is quite frankly an eye-watering amount of money for a remote control, although I did notice when researching for this video that Apple still sells the remote for the Gen 3 box for $20, so make of that what you will. Because the other option that you do have, which Apple are more than happy to remind you of, is to use your other Apple products like your iPhone, your watch, even your iPad as a remote control instead. And of course, if you get good at using Siri to navigate your way around your Apple TV, a lack of touch control suddenly isn't quite such a big issue anymore. So there you go, my thoughts on the new Apple TV 4K Siri Remote. What do you think? Are you considering buying one? Would you consider upgrading to the new Apple TV box? Or is the whole thing a bit of a con by Apple? Drop me a comment and let me know what you think. And as ever, if you found this video useful, do please consider leaving me a like and subscribing to the channel for more content like this in the future. See you on the next video.